Hi, I'm Claire, and today I'm going to be telling you about sudden unexpected infant death syndrome, SUDS, or SIDS. I'm probably going to be calling it SIDS, which is just sudden infant death syndrome throughout my presentation. So first, SIDS is the #1 cause of post-neonatal death in the US today, and it is used to describe the death of an infant that is less than 1 year of age that was sudden and had no obvious cause, such as an injury or an underlying medical condition. I'm going to be telling you about the risk factors, why African Americans are more likely to be affected by it, and then possible prevention techniques that you can do to protect your children. So before I get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about the visual here. This pretty much just shows an infant who fell asleep on their stomach, who ran out of oxygen and in turns died. That is one of the common ways SIDS affects children. So first, risk factors. This is what makes an infant more at risk, and what, like, before parents get involved and do anything. It's just the natural why. So the top two, I'd say the most important, are the sex and ethnicity, but I will be mentioning all of them throughout this. So first, boys are actually more likely to be affected by SIDS than females, and there's not much research on that yet, but some doctors think it is because boys are harder to arouse during their sleep, so they won't wake up as easily if they move over and don't have enough oxygen like a female might. But there's, as I said, there's still more research going on that, so that's just something that parents should really be aware of if they have a male child. So the ethnicity is one of the main points of my presentation, so I'm talking a lot about that. It has been found that all non-white infants, such as African American or Hispanic or Asian, are actually more at risk than white infants from dying of SUDS. I'm going to specifically talk about why African Americans are 2.4 times more likely to die from SIDS than a white infants say, but we will get into that more later. So the age that is affected most for this is anywhere between 2 to 4 months. It can happen a little bit younger and it can still happen a little bit older, but the prime age for something like this to occur is 2 to 4 months. So for the parents, they should just be very aware and very vigilant and keep an eye on their children during that time, because it is very common to occur, unfortunately. Another thing, family history. So I find this one most interesting because it basically says if someone like your uncle's kid or your mom's kid or anyone in your family has died from a SIDS related death, that it actually makes you more likely to die from a SIDS related event. So it runs in the family, and I'm not really sure how that works, but I know they're doing a lot more research on that right now. So we'll just keep reading about that online. So the next ones are young maternal age, maternal smoking, and maternal drinking. Now those are all things mothers can do before they actually have their child. So prevention for this disease starts before the child is even born, is when the mother can start taking the first few steps, which would be those by limiting exposure to all that. Your baby will come out healthier and is then at lesser risk of SIDS. As well as preterm birth. While I know parents obviously can't really affect if they have their child early or not, but I think it's important that they know that if they have it preterm, it could affect their rates of SIDS and it would make them higher. So it's just another important thing to really be aware of when you have a young child. So now we're going to be talking about, as I mentioned earlier, African Americans and why they are much more likely to be affected by this than a white infant. So as mentioned before, African Americans are 2.4 times more likely to die from SIDS than a white infant. Now, the article Sudden Infant Death and Sleep Practices in the Black Community by Stifler talks about the rise of SIDS in the Black community and possible contributing factors, and she pretty much narrowed it down to 3 main things: convenience, safety, and culture, which here is the graphic from the article itself, actually. So I'm going to be talking about the points on there. The article focused on African Americans in a lower socioeconomic standard group. So that's where space and comfort come in. While they might want to take good care of their child, they obviously want to take good care of their children, they might not have the physical space to have a crib in the house, so they might just have them sleep in their bed, which is actually extremely dangerous to the infant. So it's really important that they don't do that, as well as convenience. Obviously, it's a lot more convenient to, have your infant right there in the room and even in the same bed as you. If they cry or need their diaper changed or anything like that in the middle of the night, it's much more convenient to have it that way. So a lot of them do it that way, even though it is increasing the likelihood of this occurring. Next is safety, and now it talked about excessive bedding and vigilance as the two examples for this. Um, it was found that a lot of African American mothers actually ignored the request of the doctors about sleeping on a stiff or firm mattress, which we'll talk about later, and was more concerned with the comfort and aesthetic of the nursery. So they would give like excessive bedding and excessive blankets and stuffed animals, which is actually really dangerous and increases choking possibilities for the infants, as well as vigilance, as I mentioned earlier. That goes along with convenience. They like to check on their children a lot during the night, and it's a lot harder to do when they're further away and not just right there in the same bed, even though again that's dangerous. As well as their culture and their traditions. A lot of their traditions don't have the infants like far away from the family, and they like the aesthetics of the bedding, so they want to follow like the traditions and how they were raised with their children, even though some of the traditions actually do put the child more at risk. So now, enough of the scary stuff. I'm going to tell you what you can do now to prevent this. Follow these tips and tricks to help your children and prevent against SIDS. So the first one is by far the most important: sleep supine. For those who don't know, supine is when they lay on their back, such as the little infant is doing in that picture. Where prone is when they sleep on their stomach with their face in the pillow. Sleeping supine is super important because that means their head is open and their airway is open, and there's less of a possibility for anything to get in the way. Where if they sleep prone, they can just be breathing in the same carbon dioxide they're breathing out, which is extremely dangerous and can cause lack of oxygen in their brain and result in death. Next is sleeping on a firm surface. Again, super important. The doctors recommend a crib or like a very hard mattress. That way, if they do try to turn over and get on their stomach in the middle of the night, there'll be a bit of resistance working against them, and it won't be as easy to do that. And as I mentioned earlier, sleep in the same room. That's good because you can check on them, but do not sleep in the same bed because that will allow easy access while still not putting them at risk from something you could do while you sleep. So that goes along with no objects in the bed, stuffed animals, blankets. All that are possible choking hazards to the infant and could cause them to close their airway and get an obstruction in that. That's where the pacifier comes in as well, which is down here. That'll have something in their mouth, which will be less of a chance they can get a foreign object in there that could result in an airway blockage. And the last one, I know some others can't breastfeed, but research is still being done on this one as well, but it has been found that mothers who breastfeed longer and more often with their babies actually do have less of a chance of dying from SIDS. But again, that's still being looked into, so we'll have to keep our eyes out for more information on that. So yeah, pretty much knowing the risk factors and prevention is very important for this disease because there is no treatment and there is no cure, and it's not a reversible thing. You have to be very diligent and have your eyes open to protect your children, because at the end of the day, if this occurs, you can't undo that. So make sure your children sleep alone, sleep on their back, and sleep in a crib. Those are the most important things to know, as well as just keeping an eye on them while they sleep. And then hopefully we can take the 3,600 infants that die per year from SUDS, and we can reduce that number. But by following these techniques and understanding risk factors, your infants will stand a much better chance against a still very much unknown disease. Thank you.